welcome to The Third Voice. In 2004, in Southern California, I'd been in America for about 14 days. I was in the passenger seat of my friend's Honda Civic. Windows down, no air conditioning. We were just driving around, getting to know the area. Then I saw the lights, red and blue, flashing behind us. My stomach dropped. We pulled over. The officer walked up, started talking to my friend, then looked at me and said something I didn't understand. My friend tried to translate. The officer told him to be quiet. He asked me again. I said, "I'm sorry, I don't understand." He made me get out of the car. I stood there on the shoulder of the highway. Cars running past. A young black man, a police officer, and I had no idea what I'd done wrong. He wrote me a ticket, handed it to me. I couldn't read most of it, but the number at the bottom, that I understood. $150. That was more than half the money I had left in the world. Later, my friend explained I wasn't wearing the seatbelt, and in the country I came from, seatbelts were optional. I didn't even think about it. But in California, not wearing a seatbelt was illegal. And as the judge told me when I tried to explain, ignorance of the law is no excuse. That ticket changed my life. Not because of the money, not because of the embarrassment, but because of what it taught me about American justice. Two people were talking, the officer and me, but we weren't speaking the same language. Not just English, something deeper. He was speaking the language of the law, rules, procedures, violations, and consequences. I was speaking the language of confusion, of being new, of not knowing, and there was no one standing between us to translate. No one to say to the officer, he genuinely doesn't understand what he did wrong. No one to say to me, here is what the law requires, and here is why it matters. Just two people talking past each other. And when that happens, the person with power always wins. Every time. That's when I decided someone needs to stand in that space between the law and the people. Someone needs to be the third voice. I'm Mucho Belinda, and this is The Third Voice. Let me show what I mean by the third voice. Imagine a courtroom, any courtroom. On one side, you have the law, the judge in the row, the prosecutor with the files, the attorney with the legal arguments. They speak in a very specific language. Precedent, statutes, burden of proof, due process, hearsay, admissible evidence. This is the first voice. On the other side, you have the people, the defendants, the witness, the victim's family, the person whose life is about to change. They speak in a different language. I didn't know. That's not what I meant. But I was trying to help. This isn't fair. This is the second voice. And here's the problem. The two voices don't speak the same language. The law speaks in abstractions, rules that apply to everyone, everywhere, all the time. The people speak in specifics, their story, their situation, their life. And when these two voices talk past each other, bad things happen. The judge thinks the defendant is being evasive. The defendant thinks the judge isn't listening. The attorney thinks the witness is lying. The witness thinks the attorney is twisting their words. The system thinks it's being fair. The people think it's being cruel. And the gap just gets wider. That's where interpreters come in. Not just language interpreters, though that's where I started, but interpreters of systems, of worldviews, of assumptions both sides are making. The interpreter stands between the two voices and says to the judge, when he says, "I didn't know," he's not making excuses. In his country, this wasn't illegal. He genuinely didn't understand. To the defendant, when the judge says ignorance of the law is no excuse, he's not being cruel. He's applying a legal principle that says everyone is responsible for knowing the rules. The interpreter doesn't take sides, doesn't change the outcome, doesn't argue the case. The interpreter just makes sure both sides understand what the other is actually saying. That's the third voice. And that's what's missing right now at the Supreme Court. Think about it. The Supreme Court makes decisions that affect every American. Education, healthcare, voting, guns, abortion, marriage, speech, religion, work, your body, your property, your rights. But when the court issues a decision, who's explaining it? On one side, you have the law, the court itself, legal scholars, constitutional experts. They speak in legal terminology. Precedent, stare decisis, judicial review, strict scrutiny, rational basis tests. This is the first voice. On the other side, you have the people. Citizens whose lives are affected, families trying to figure out what this means for them. They speak in practical terms. Can I still get an abortion? Will my vote count? Is my kid's school going to change? This is the second voice. And in between, there's supposed to be someone translating. Journalists, educators, civic institutions. But here is what's actually happening. Partisan media takes over. Fox News tells conservatives the decision is great. MSNBC tells liberals it's terrible. Or vice versa. Social media explode. Everyone has an opinion. No one actually read the decision. Legal experts write analysis pieces that other legal experts read. But ordinary citizens can't understand. And citizens are left confused, angry, feeling like something important just happened, but they're not sure what, because there is no third voice. No one standing between the court and the people saying, here's what the court actually decided. Not what your tribe says. What the court actually said. Here is why they decided it this way. The reasoning, the precedent they cited, the argument they rejected. Here's what it means for your life, practically, concretely. What changes, what doesn't. Without that third voice, the two sides just talk past each other. The court thinks it's being clear. Citizens think the court is speaking gibberish. The court thinks citizens should just accept its decisions. Citizens think the court is out of touch. The court loses legitimacy. Citizens lose faith. And democracy erodes. That's the gap I'm trying to fill. Here's what the third voice does and what it doesn't do. The third voice does not tell you what to think. I'm not here to say this decision is right or this decision is wrong. I'm not here to advocate for liberal or conservative outcomes. I'm not here to tell you how to feel about abortions, guns, religion, speech, or any other issue the court decides. That's your job. You get to think for yourself. But you can't think for yourself if you don't understand what you're thinking about. So it is what the third voice does do. First, translation. When the court issues a decision, I'm going to read it, all of it. The majority opinion, the dissent, the concurrences. and I'm going to translate into plain English, not by dumbing it down, but by making it accessible. What did they decide? Why did they decide it that way? What legal reasoning did they use? What precedents did they cite? What argument did they reject? No jargon, no assumptions that you went to law school, just clear explanation. Second, context. Why does this case exist? How did it get to the Supreme Court? What's the history behind this issue? How have other courts decided similar cases? Because decisions don't happen in a vacuum. They have context, and understanding context helps you understand the decision. Third, implications. What does this actually mean for your life? Not in abstract legal terms, in concrete, practical terms. If you're a teacher, what changes? If you're a voter, what changes? If you're a parent, a business owner, a religious person, a gun owner, what changes? Fourth, multiple perspectives. I'm going to show you how different people see this decision, not to tell you which perspective is right, but so you understand why people are reacting the way they are, why conservatives are celebrating or upset, why liberals are celebrating or upset, why libertarians have a different take, why legal scholars are saying something different from activists. You don't have to agree with all these perspectives, but you should understand them. That's what the third voice does. It stands between the court and the citizens, not taking sides, not deciding outcomes, not telling you what to think, just making sure you understand what's actually happening so you can participate in democracy as an informed citizen. Because here's the truth. You can't have democracy without informed citizens. You can't have legitimacy without understanding. You can't have justice without translation. And right now, the Supreme Court is losing legitimacy because there is no effective third voice. Let me give you an example of what this looks like in practice. In 2022, the Supreme Court decided Dobbs versus Jackson, women's health. This is the case that overturned Roe v. Wade. Now, if you only got your information from partisan media, here's what you heard. Conservative media. The court correctly returned abortion to the states. The Constitution doesn't mention abortion. This is a victory for life and democracy. Liberal media. The court stripped away fundamental rights. This is about controlling women's bodies. This is a catastrophe. Both sides speaking to their tribe. Both sides assuming you already agree with them. But here's what the third voice would say. The court decided that the Constitution does not protect a right to abortion. Here's the legal reasoning they used. They said Roe was wrongly decided in 1973 because the right to abortion is not explicitly in the Constitution and is not deeply rooted in American history and tradition. They applied a test for when to overturn precedent. They concluded that states can now regulate abortion however they want. Here is what this means. If you live in a state that bans abortion, you can't get an abortion there. If you live in a state that protects abortion, nothing changes for you. The court didn't ban abortion. It said the Constitution doesn't require state law to allow it. Here's why conservatives support it. They believe abortion is morally wrong and that unelected judges shouldn't have imposed a right that isn't in the Constitution. They think this decision returns power to voters. Here is why liberals oppose this. They believe bodily autonomy is a fundamental right, even if not explicitly written in the Constitution. They think this decision will harm women, especially poor women and women of color, who can travel to other states. Now you can decide what you think. You see the difference? The third voice doesn't tell you abortion is good or bad. The third voice doesn't tell you the decision is right or wrong. The third voice says, here's what happened. Here's the reasoning. Here's what it means. Here's why people disagree. Now you can think for yourself. That's what this podcast does. Every week, for every major decision, every major question about how the court works, I'm the interpreter, standing between the court and you, making sure you understand what's being said so you can participate in democracy as an informed citizen. Now, you might be wondering, why me? Why should you trust me to be that third voice? It's a fair question. Here's my answer. For 15 years, I worked as a court interpreter. I stood in courtrooms translating between judges and people who didn't speak English. But I wasn't just translating words. I was translating worldviews, cultural assumptions, legal concepts that don't exist in other languages. I learned how to stand between two people who don't understand each other and make sure both sides are actually hearing what the other side is saying. I learned how to be neutral, how to not take sides, how to translate faithfully even when I personally disagree with one side or the other. I learned how to make complex legal language accessible without changing its meaning. And I learned something else. The people who most need translation are the ones who don't know they need it. The defendant who thinks he's explaining himself clearly, but is actually making himself look guilty because he doesn't understand how legal language works. The judge who thinks he's being fair, but he's actually being incomprehensible because he doesn't realize how much specialized vocabulary he's using. Both sides thinking they're communicating. Both sides talking past each other. That's exactly what's happening with the Supreme Court right now. The court thinks it's being clear. Citizens can't understand what they're saying. Citizens think they understand the court, but they are actually hearing partisan interpretations, not what the court actually said. Someone needs to stand in the middle and translate. That's what I've been trained to do for 15 years in real courtrooms with real consequences. And that's what I'm doing now for the Supreme Court. So here is what's coming. Next week, episode 2. I'm going to tell you the full story of that traffic stop, what happened in the courtroom, what I learned, and how it shaped everything that came after. Episode 3, how the Supreme Court actually works, how cases get there, how oral arguments work, how decisions get made. The stuff you'd know if you went to law school, like you did. Episode 4, I'm going to break down a real Supreme Court decision, step by step, line by line, showing you exactly how to read one so you can start doing it yourself. Then we'll go deeper into specific issues, into how other countries structure their courts, into what reform might look like. But it all starts with understanding, with translation, with a third voice. 12 episodes, 12 weeks. Give me that. And if at the end you think I'm wrong about something, fine. At least you'll understand what you're disagreeing with. At least you'll be able to articulate your own position clearly. At least you'll be an informed citizen who can participate in democracy meaningfully. That's all I'm asking. 20 years ago, I got a ticket I didn't understand. People were talking, the officer and me, but we weren't speaking the same language, and there was no one standing between us to translate. That experience led me to 15 years in courtrooms, to becoming an interpreter, to learning how to stand between two worlds and make sure both sides understand each other. And now, I'm applying that skill to the Supreme Court, because right now, the court and the citizens aren't speaking the same language. and there's no effective third voice translate. The court speaks in legal terminology. Citizens hear partisan interpretations. The court thinks it's being clear. Citizens think it's being incomprehensible. The gap grows wider. Legitimacy erodes. Democracy weakens. Someone needs to stand in that gap. Someone needs to translate, to interpret, to be the third voice. That's what this podcast is. Not telling you what to think, but making sure you understand what you're thinking about. Not advocating for outcomes, but explaining reasoning. Not taking sides, but translating between sides. That's the third voice. And that's what's been missing until now. Next week, we'll have the full story. The courtroom, the judge, what happened after. Subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. And if this resonates, share it with someone. The whole point is making the court comprehensive. That works better when more people are part of the conversation. Thank you for listening or watching, and I'll see you next week.